The truth didn't arrive with a press release, it arrived like a bomb ticking in the dark, shaking the walls of a marriage, a monarchy, and a man who could no longer breathe under the weight of his own silence. This wasn't gossip. This wasn't spin. This was the night Prince Harry realized the story he helped protect was about to turn on him and on her.
Here in the States, it's multiple publications that's reporting it in the
working worlds with the monarchy.
The night pressed down hard, the kind that sits on your chest and refuses to move. Inside his California estate, Harry paced like a man trapped in a room with no exits. This wasn't tabloids. This wasn't paparazzi. This wasn't even the online noise that never shuts up. This was something else, private, intimate, and terrifying in a way cameras could never capture. He hadn't slept. Not really. Friends say days blurred together as he stared at screens, reread old messages, replayed conversations, and whispered questions into the dark that had no safe answers. Whatever was coming couldn't be managed, couldn't be massaged into a narrative, couldn't be hidden behind polished interviews and careful smiles.
In a recent interview, stunned fans. What did he say?
And then there was DL. The name barely existed publicly, buried under legal language, sealed with NDAs, erased by silence so complete it looked intentional. She wasn't a rumor. She wasn't a footnote. She was real, and she was about to detonate the fairy tale the world thought it knew. For years, people believed they had seen everything. The glowing announcements, the perfectly timed appearances, the maternity dresses, the photos that felt almost too neat. A story so smooth it left no room for doubt. But Dill's account didn't glide. It cut, quietly, precisely, like a scalpel. She claimed she was the biological mother of Archie and Lilibet, not a surrogate pulled from a brochure, not a background figure, her. And she didn't arrive with feelings. She arrived with paper, clinic records, D-nut trails, transport logs, appointment confirmations, dates, times, signatures, every missing piece the public never saw, preserved, cataloged, and ready. The kind of evidence that makes lawyers go pale and institutions go silent, because if even part of it held, the entire image would fracture. When Dill finally delivered her account, insiders say Harry's world didn't crack, it collapsed. There was no screaming, no dramatics. Her anger, if you could call it that, was surgical. She didn't want revenge, she wanted recognition. She wanted the truth acknowledged on record in history where silence could no longer erase her. According to her, she was removed from the narrative entirely. No acknowledgement, no aftercare, no role once the children were taken. The story was rewritten with precision, leaving no space for her existence. And Harry, confronted with the scale of what she was asserting, reportedly broke in a way those close to him had never seen. This wasn't about bad press. This was about shame. Every interview he'd given, every magazine spread, every smiling photo. Suddenly, it all felt staged, theater masking something far darker. Friends say he cried the kind of tears that don't look good on camera, the kind that come from realizing protection has a cost, and that cost had finally come due. He believed he was shielding his family. He believed secrecy was love, but now he saw the bill. And it wasn't paid in headlines, it was paid in truth withheld for too long. Then came the documents that made everything worse. Birth certificates that should have been straightforward now looked altered, names scrubbed, connections erased, administrative convenience, some would say. DL said it was deliberate, a calculated move to prevent legal challenge and preserve a single, polished version of events. The timing of everything suddenly mattered. Public appearances that once felt celebratory now felt delayed. Announcements that once seemed joyful now felt controlled. According to DL, the children had already been born when the world first saw them. Not days, weeks. Illusion, she called it. Control through presentation. If her documents went public, this wouldn't be a scandal. It would be a legal earthquake spanning continents. Questions of lineage, of protocol, of succession. Foundations rarely questioned, now exposed. Harry felt it immediately. The haunting realization that he couldn't stop what was coming. Not anymore. He paced. He whispered apologies into empty rooms. He reread messages like they might change if he stared long enough. Every phone notification felt like a countdown. He didn't eat. He didn't leave. He sat surrounded by documents that confirmed his worst fear, that the truth wasn't messy. It was meticulous. Emails lined up with dates. Photos matched timestamps. Logs cross-checked cleanly. There were no loose ends to tug at. No easy dismissals. DL's account wasn't emotional. It was verifiable. Lawyers warned him even partial disclosure would ignite global scrutiny. British media media, American networks, courts, historians, analysts. Everyone would have questions and no one would accept silence again. And then came the moment Harry stopped trying to find an escape. He realized secrecy had become a trap. He had left royal life chasing freedom, transparency, and control over his own story. And yet here he was, suffocating under a secret he helped protect. The irony cut deep because the silence he thought would save them was now the very thing destroying everything. Advisors whispered strategy. Lawyers drafted contingencies. But none of it could erase the evidence still held. And Harry knew it. By the time the sun rose over Montecito, he was already awake. Bloodshot eyes, jittery hands. The early light was unforgiving, the kind that exposes everything. He sat staring at a single file, its title plain and devastating, timeline and documentation. Inside, every page tightened the knot in his chest. At the end, one line sat quietly, bold and final, all evidence preserved, ready for disclosure. That was the moment he understood something had shifted permanently. He could keep hiding or he could step into the truth himself. And according to those closest to him, Harry finally chose the one thing he had avoided for years. He chose confrontation. By mid-morning, the silence around the house felt louder than any headline. Harry sat motionless, documents spread across the table like evidence in a trial he never wanted to face. Every page carried a timestamp. Every timestamp carried a consequence. This was no longer about managing perception. This was about deciding who he was going to be when the truth finally broke. Friends say he whispered the same line over and over as if repetition could turn guilt into justification. I did it for them. I did it for them. But the words no longer comforted him. They echoed back hollow, stripped of meaning, because Dill's story wasn't just about paperwork or timelines, it was about erasure. And once he saw that, he couldn't unsee it. The call he dreaded most came next. When he finally reached Meghan, it wasn't the polished, controlled voice the public knew. It was panic, sharp, defensive, angry. She demanded to know what he was thinking. She demanded to know if he was really going to let her speak, if he was really going to let this destroy everything they had built. Harry didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. According to insiders, he spoke slowly, deliberately, like a man already past the point of negotiation. He told her he couldn't hide it anymore. That secrecy had stopped being protection and had become damage. That the truth was bigger than image, bigger than strategy, bigger than fear. The line went quiet. That silence said more than shouting ever could. From that moment, the marriage wasn't cracking, it was splitting clean down the middle. Across the Atlantic, whispers started before any statement was made. Advisors sensed movement. Lawyers noticed urgency. Media watchers flagged Harry's disappearance from public view. No posts, no appearances, no distraction. When a man who lives in the spotlight goes dark, people feel it before they understand it. DL, meanwhile, didn't rush. She didn't tease. She didn't leak. She prepared. According to sources close to her, she spent hours organizing documentation with methodical calm. Emails aligned, medical records labeled, travel logs matched, every detail cross-checked. Not for drama, for verification. She understood something most people didn't. The louder the storm, the more quietly facts need to speak. Harry watched it unfold from a distance, torn between dread and relief. Dread because once it was public, there would be no retreat. Relief because the truth no longer lived only in his chest. By evening, his advisors gathered. The conversation was brutal in its simplicity. How do you disclose without detonating everything at once? How do you protect the children while admitting the past? How do you survive what comes after? There were no perfect answers, but there was one decision. Harry would speak first, not with accusations, not with deflection, with acknowledgement. He would confirm DL's existence. He would validate her role. He would accept responsibility for the secrecy without hiding behind explanations that no longer mattered. This wasn't spin, it was surrender. The night before disclosure, he barely slept. He sat alone, the Pacific dark beyond the windows, documents neatly stacked in front of him. Each page represented a choice he could no longer undo. The secrecy, the silence, the belief that managing reality was safer than confronting it. At some point, he stopped pacing and started writing. The statement wasn't long, it wasn't dramatic, it didn't attack anyone. It simply admitted what had been hidden, that DL existed, that her role had been obscured, and that the children's welfare mattered more than protecting any narrative. No blame, no excuses, just truth spoken too late but finally spoken at all. When the interview went live, the reaction was immediate. Harry didn't look polished, he looked exhausted. His hands trembled slightly. His voice held weight, the kind that comes from carrying something heavy for too long. He confirmed what he had once avoided. He acknowledged complexity. He admitted regret. And when he spoke about the children, his voice broke in a way that couldn't be coached. Outside, the media erupted. Inside, something shifted. DL watched quietly as the world reacted. She didn't celebrate. She didn't rush forward. She waited. And when she finally appeared, she did so without theatrics. No glamour, no spin, just herself. Calm, composed, factual. She stated her claim plainly. She outlined timelines, she referenced records, she didn't attack Meghan, she didn't dramatize Harry, she reclaimed her own story. That restraint changed everything. Skeptics paused, analysts leaned in, lawyers started reading instead of speculating. Because this wasn't rumor chasing attention, it was documentation demanding recognition. The reaction was seismic. Some defended Meghan fiercely. Others questioned everything they thought they knew. Experts debated implications. Historians talked precedent. Legal minds examined protocol. The story stopped being celebrity gossip and became something heavier, a collision between private decisions and public legacy. Meghan stayed silent. That silence spoke volumes. Her advisors scrambled. Statements were drafted and redrafted. Every possible response risked making things worse. Denial clashed with documentation. Emotion clashed with evidence. Control slipped further with every passing hour. Harry, meanwhile, didn't retreat. He stayed visible, not performative, present. He acknowledged the pain. He acknowledged his role. He focused relentlessly on the children, insisting they be shielded from the spectacle unfolding around them. Behind closed doors, he reportedly reached out to DL directly, not to manage her, not to silence her, to ensure safety, to acknowledge responsibility, to accept what could no longer be denied. By the following morning, legal reviews were underway in multiple jurisdictions. Birth records examined, agreements scrutinized, timelines verified. This wasn't about opinion anymore, it was about fact. And fact, once released, doesn't care who it embarrasses. The world woke up changed. The fairy tale had cracked. The image had fractured. And in its place stood something far less comfortable. A truth shaped by secrecy, fear, and decisions made under pressure. Harry stood by a window as the sun rose again over Montecito. Exhaustion etched into his face. He wasn't free, not yet, but he wasn't hiding either. For the first time in years, the weight he carried was shared, not managed, not buried, but acknowledged. Deal stood ready, documents in hand, calm and unwavering. Meghan remained silent, her carefully curated control finally beyond reach. And the story, once polished, once protected, now belonged to history. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. The curtain hadn't closed. It had finally been pulled back. Finally been pulled back. Finally been pulled back. Finally been